Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm very pleased to be here. I think this is the second or perhaps third time I think that I've addressed the NES board, and I appreciate the invitation, and I always enjoy the experience. Your questions are the opening that you posed. They're the important questions, and not all of them have clear answers. By the way, we're going to have to work together to solve those problems. I want to first thank you all for the partnership with NES. You mentioned that it's very, very important. I think we're making great strides. I was so pleased to have Teresa and Mayor O'Connell at the ribbon cutting for our collaboration center just down the street. We had a ribbon cutting on a Goodwill solar training facility here in town just in the last few weeks. I think that has great potential to train a workforce. So I look forward to expanding this partnership. I appreciate your comments too on the listening session. Thank you for accommodating me. I have a longstanding commitment to engage with the American Association of Blacks in Energy. Immediately following this, they're helping to improve the diversity and help us build training and recruitment pipelines in the energy industry, something we're going to need if we're going to be able to staff this industry in the long term. To the extent I don't get to hear the comments made from the public today, my staff will brief me. I'm always open to them, and I put great value on them. It's excellent perspective for us. Before I go to nuclear, let me set a little bit of context. And Mr. Chair, you began to do this. So it's a pivotal time in the energy industry. We are seeing some rather dramatic trends. We come out of a decade of essentially zero load growth, where there was a lot of extra capacity in the system, not just TVA, but the nation. And what we've seen in the last 3 years is rather explosive growth. And that growth is in both energy and peak demand. You know, a great example of this was just this past January during Winter Storm Heather. We saw early morning and late evening peaks that shattered every record in the book. So we set a new peak by 1,100 megawatts. 4 of the 7 highest energy consumption days in TVA's history were that week. And what's driving this? Well, what's driving this is in-migration for us. You see it if we look out the windows here or we look across Tennessee, population coming to this area because it's such a great place. We see it in electrification. So many people think about that as vehicles, but really this is industry electrifying their fundamental processes because of its low cost, because of its great flexibility, and because our electricity system is a low carbon alternative, even with the carbon emissions embedded in it that exist today. And also industrial and commercial load growth. You mentioned Oracle. But we could talk about Ford, GM, SK, LG, Steel Dynamics, First Solar. These are all the industries that we want and that we're incenting to build a clean energy future. But when those industries land, they need power. And so we're seeing that across the valley. And so we have to serve this low growth, and we have to do it reliably, increasingly resilient, even as we drive our carbon emissions down. This is going to be a challenge for the next 30 years. The key here, I think, is diversity. No one technology, no one program, no one generating source can meet these objectives: reliable, resilient, affordable, and clean. It's going to take a portfolio of assets, and that portfolio of assets is going to have to change over time as technology develops and opportunity presents itself. So what are we doing? Well, we last year rolled out $1.5 billion energy efficiency program that's getting traction now, that's designed to take 30% of the load growth out. It's a good objective. If you use less energy, you build less, you emit less. Really important. Within the next few weeks, we'll roll out a set of demand response programs that are based on customer feedback to help shape the load around those peaks, those 2 or 3 or 4 days a year where the energy, either because it's hot or because it's cold, has to be reduced. And typically those happen for us in the winter And unfortunately, they happen in the dark before the sun comes up and after the sun goes down. And so they present a special challenge. We're also doing everything we can to leverage our existing facilities. We're, for example, extending the lives of our hydroelectric units. We're bringing back into service hydro turbines that were set aside years ago as not cost effective or practical. We're squeezing every resource we can out of those. We're investing in the transmission system, strategic transmission investments to change this from a system that was built to flow power from a generator to a customer to one that's built to flow power in multiple directions from multiple sources. And so we have $3 billion worth of transmission investment going on right now that will add capacity to this system. Of course, we're building some gas assets, and this is controversial. These are assets that are necessary to stand behind the expanding intermittent renewables, that are necessary to serve those peaks and make sure it's reliable. And as we build those, we're building them to be able to fuel them with green hydrogen when that comes available, up to 100%. And we're laying out those sites to be able to backfit carbon capture technology if that technology matures to hopefully drive down their carbon emissions in the long term. Of course, we're building renewable assets, solar particularly, and storage as rapidly as we can. There are constraints there that everyone in the nation's dealing with, some more acutely than others. Land availability and opposition to the use of that land, supply chain issues, which hopefully will free up over the next number of years, interconnection constraints. 3 years ago, we would have had a dozen interconnection requests a year to process. Now we have 200 or 300. And so those processes have to be overhauled to accommodate this new reality. Okay, all of those are necessary. And here's where new nuclear comes in, or here's where nuclear comes in. It's important because it is one of the technologies that we have to develop to be commercially available and expandable in the 30s as part of this diverse mix. And we have to make sure we're not putting all our eggs in that basket. That's why these other things I mentioned are vitally important. But we do need nuclear if we're going to solve this issue. You start out with our existing nuclear fleet. So we are investing in it to increase its capacity, improve its reliability, and extend its life. In the first quarter of this year, 47% of the energy that we generated and provided to our customers came from that nuclear fleet. That's an all-time high for TVA. And those, we're in the process right now of extending the lives of those units because it's bedrock that we have to build on. But it's not enough. And so we have a new nuclear program that has several elements to it, in addition to optimizing the existing nuclear fleet. The first is Generation 3 plus light water small modular reactors. This is Clinch River, where we are partnered with Ontario Power, Synthos Green Energy in Poland, and GE Hitachi to develop and build 300 megawatts small modular reactors at the Clinch River site. And if successful there, perhaps at multiple other sites across the valley. The advantage of these is their size. They can be integrated into the transmission system quite well. They can be sited on existing sites, perhaps retired coal unit sites. Because of their size, they can be removed from service for maintenance quite easily. When you get to nth of a kind, these can largely be modularized and factory built and delivered and built on the site with lower risk and lower cost. The first reactor at Clinch River could be in service nominally by 2032. We're still working on the design, the cost, and the schedule for that, with others, perhaps 3 others to follow on that site. And I can talk about where we are in that program. The second element of this is to look at Generation 4 reactors. So there we're partnered with Kairos, and who is designing and building a molten fluoride salt fast breeder reactor design. Actually, the first prototype unit has already received its construction permit from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Is going to be built at Oak Ridge. Beyond that is Hermes 2, which would be the first of that design to produce electricity. Take the learnings from that test reactor and turn it into the next level of learning, which is an electrical production facility. And Kairos is looking to do that at Oak Ridge as well. And there are some advantages of the Generation 4 technology, although there are more engineering and R&D challenges with it at this point. And we are constantly evaluating and reevaluating large-scale new nuclear, Westinghouse AP1000s, for example, that was built at Vogtle, because I think in the long run, the country may need to build at that scale, not as a substitute for, but as a complement for small modular reactors. And so, you know, in a nutshell, our nuclear program is leverage, optimize, and extend the existing fleet, develop a Generation 3+ light water small modular reactor that can be deployed at scale, engage in Gen 4+ reactor development, like the Hermes project. And I would add one other element. We recently became the host to Type 1 Fusion, which is one of the leading fusion power companies in the world. They're going to headquarter at Oak Ridge, and they will be building their Stellarator magnetic containment test facility at our Bull Run retired coal unit. We're going to reuse the turbine building and all that infrastructure to launch that Stellarator research and development program. And I hold that out as a potential solution in the long run. To your difficult question, what if this doesn't work, what would be plan B? Well, you can tell from my comments on nuclear, we have a plan A, B, C, and D in the nuclear space. But that's precisely why continuing to build out renewables, exploring storage alternatives, including pumped hydro, developing new transmission solutions, energy efficiency, and constructing our gas assets to be able to take advantage of low carbon fuels or carbon capture are all part of this diverse portfolio. And, you know, to be completely honest, what the mix is going to be 20 years from now, I can't say. It depends on what technology develops that can be deployed. So let me stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Good. I'll defer. Rob?
I guess I have a question. I was with a group headed up by this Andrew Liveris, who ran Dow and Lucid Motors, and really claims to be the principal advisor to the Saudis in their migration from oil. We had about a 3-hour discussion, and this group basically came away with that base power is going to be gas in the interim, probably migrating to some form of nuclear along the portfolio choices that you had. There's really no other option. And they were pretty much jaundiced on renewables. Hydro, where you can get it, but solar and wind, maybe some scale projects, but they considered those sort of environmentally harmful and ugly. So that was sort of the conclusion to that. Could you react to that?
Yeah.
I know it's controversial, but
yeah, I'm maybe not quite there. I think renewables are an important part of this mix, and we should exploit them. I think there is a practical limitation to them. I agree. And that practical limitation comes when you get into land use and environmental issues around them. But there's also an engineering, there's a physics issue. You know, each new megawatt of renewables you put on the grid is worth less than the last. There's a point of diminishing return for this. Of course, you can extend that with storage, and that's why we're considering pumped hydro. So for TVA, we have about 3,000 megawatts of solar, either in service or under construction right now. We're driving for 10,000 megawatts in the coming years. We think that's a number that we can integrate it into this system. And so that's important. We'll also look at transmission investment that might unlock some import capability if wind is available to import from the Midwest. And so I think we should continue down this path. I think energy efficiency is going to be vitally important, particularly as you think about the explosion in growth related to machine learning and AI, data processing. We've got to find a way to do that more efficiently. To get to your question, though, these are intermittent resources. They have to be integrated into a system, and gas is a bridge to that future. And I don't see another bridge. I think if, in particular here where we're seeing so much growth, we need that to be able to maintain this system reliable. And for us, fortunately, we're retiring coal, so the net is a significant reduction in carbon emissions. But in the long run, you're going to need baseload power like nuclear and probably low carbon fuels and carbon capture onto the existing gas fleet to follow those peak loads and be available when we need it.
So there's sort of a thread of truth in what I articulated, but it's not quite that simple.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, but I wouldn't back away from the renewables push.
110 people at this meeting, and all of them felt nuclear was essential.
I think it is. It is the only real 24/7 dispatchable source of zero carbon power at the scale that we need it. Think about this electrical consumption doubling or tripling over the next 30 years. What we took 100 years to build in this country, we're going to have to build again in the next 20. And so that's where nuclear, I think, comes into this mix. Yes, ma'am.
You touched on it. The growth is going to be exponential, and part of it will be driven by the AI revolution, everything else that's going on, and all our industrial growth. What are things we're doing? You talked a little bit. What are the investments? A little more detail on things to optimize usage. You talked about AI being used to help optimize. What are you thinking in that space?
Yeah, I think we come out of a period where electricity was, and the infrastructure to distribute it was plentiful, instantaneously there. And so businesses didn't have to think much about how they used it. They could assume it would be there 24/7. Now there are costs to that. We have to build out infrastructure. We're going to have to build a whole nother system in the next 20 or 30 years. That comes with a price. It comes with an environmental price. It comes with social costs. And so I think we're entering a period where companies like TVA and NES have to really understand what businesses need. And businesses have to think about what this grid can provide. So I'll give you an example of recent conversations I've had with AI and machine learning oriented companies. When you tie into the internet, that's 24/7 for search and for software as a service and et cetera. But when you think about AI and machine learning, that's a batch process. That power can be shaped. It can be moved from data center to data center. It can be curtailed if you need to on the peaks. And those companies haven't thought about it that way. But now they're beginning to think about it that way. They also hadn't really been thinking about energy efficiency. How do you do this more efficiently? Well, now that these constraints become clear, people begin to think about, can we do this for less energy? Can we do it differently? Hopefully I'm answering your question, but I think there's a whole chapter of this that we have to explore.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. There's a supply and a demand, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about supply. Demand piece, how we manage that demand is going to be really critical to the future. So thank you.
Very critical.
A couple of really quick questions, and I'm sure that my colleagues on the board have further ones, but one quick one is, we see other states and countries pursuing higher levels of renewables than we seem to be. And is there something unique to our valley that makes it hard for us to pursue a percentage of renewables that's surprisingly high if we think about what's happened in California recently, in some other countries? So that would be one. The other is, we haven't talked about either the risk of catastrophic failure of nuclear or how we're going to handle the storage of radioactive waste. And I'm interested in what your thinking is, what's TVA's plan? How do we make sure that we've accounted for those risks?
Yeah, more good questions. Yeah, renewables penetration and how quickly people accelerate it into is widely variable. So A part of it is a policy issue. A part of it is price. I mean, with our prices here, some of the lowest in the country, that has an impact. Solar incidents, for example, has an impact. If you're in Texas, Southern California, you're somewhere between 40 and 100% more solar incidents. So the efficiency of the asset is different. You know, and so that has a real impact. Here, wind is not a great resource, although now some of the micro turbines and some of the new technologies may have some promise for us in wind. I think wind as more of a building import capability and connectivity to where the wind is available. That may come with time. Solar, as I said, I think right now we're building every megawatt of solar we can get a panel and a piece of property for. And we've run up against a number of issues. One is supply chain, both price and availability. The second is securing land that's available and that doesn't have a higher purpose, which is now more and more on people's minds, as Mr. McCabe pointed out. And the third constraint for us is connecting it into this system. This is a national issue. PJM recently shut down their interconnection queue because of the length of time. And as I said, our queue requests have gone up by more than an order of magnitude. So right now we are in the process of redesigning that transmission queue process. FERC issued an order in 2023 to go from a serial process, first in, first out, to a sort of an open season and a batch process that we think will be helpful. We're looking at designing some fast track processes to use with renewables that will help that. And a lot of the strategic transmission investments we're making are designed to unlock interconnection capability. So what's pacing TVA, frankly, is those issues: supply chain, land availability, and interconnection. And we hope to be able to make progress solving all those. And as I said, we see 10,000 megawatts of solar being built out on this system, perhaps more. Time will tell.
So we can get maybe to the radioactive issues in a moment, but just to emphasize that point, I have no doubt that many of the different distributors that you're engaging with have different goals on this. But as I mentioned, we just brought Oracle here. You know, we are a very large customer. We compete not with the county next to us. We compete with Austin and Raleigh and Charlotte and California cities as well. And so what we need to be doing is thinking carefully about how we look over the horizon for our customers and think about how do we meet sometimes renewable power demands, sometimes zero carbon, all interested in low cost electricity as well. And so although we don't have a market system within the TVA Valley, we do need to think internally as a board how we protect our ratepayers a decade from now if TVA doesn't move as quickly in the direction in some of these areas as our customers want, maybe because the valley as a whole is going in a different direction. Yep. So one of the things that we're just thinking very hard about is, do we need to up our investments in those things that we can do within our own service area? Yeah. And I would just ask that we get TVA's help as much as possible. I think that ultimately helps TVA as well, because it helps you meet the diversity of different types of interests that your customers have.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of comments. It's been fascinating to me. I see the conversation with corporations changing just a bit. There was a period where almost every corporation was focused on renewables. Now a number of them are moving. For example, Google and Microsoft now have moved from 100% renewables to carbon-free, which is a different objective, right? Renewables then don't become an outcome. They become one of the inputs, important input. I also see companies moving from the notion that you can do this with a REC type accounting to really focusing on what's my 24/7 power profile and what am I really driving in to the environment. Those are hard discussions. I personally think that's what we should be discussing, because that's where the real progress is made. So I would comment on that. I would also tell you, I think we have a great relationship with NES. I expect this relationship to change over the next decade. We implemented a flexibility program. We learned some constraints. As a matter of fact, one of the primary constraints you raised, hey, we've got no real estate to build this solar on. Can we go outside the footprint? We changed that. Now we're running up against some other constraints. We have a very important effort we undertook over the last 2 years called Valley Vision. Teresa and the NES staff were participants in it, looking at what does this relationship have to look like by 2035? And I see that heading down a path where we are maximizing your ability to leverage the resources you can deploy in your footprint. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's optional. I think you must to fit into that puzzle, that portfolio that we talked about. So we're in full support of generating the kind of flexibility in programs. I think we have to do it in a way that makes sense business-wise, and that doesn't, we're always concerned about producing winners and losers among the local power companies. We don't want someone to benefit at another's expense. So we want to make sure costs and benefits and risks are allocated properly. But I'm optimistic about what we're going to pencil out over the next couple of years, and we'll work together to get as much as we can done while we're doing that. If I loop back to your nuclear question for a minute, just to make sure I don't miss that, the U.S. operates the safest nuclear fleet in the world. And so what we're doing with new nuclear designs is taking an already safe technology and making it orders of magnitude safer. So for example, these small modular reactors are completely passive designs. They rely on physics and not active components. A design like the BWRX 300, in the worst case event, your primary objective is not to touch it for a week. It's got all that it needs to be safe. And these Gen 4 plants perhaps even move on from there. So very, very safe designs. It's always the focus. Nuclear fuel. All the nuclear fuel that we've used in the country in the last 50 years, we store on the sites where it was produced. And just to give you an idea, if I took all that fuel and put it in one place, it would occupy generally about one football field. So we're not talking about a mammoth volume of things here, although it's high energy and it's got a long half-life. If we are going to significantly expand nuclear as part of our solution, then my own personal opinion is the country has to revisit closing the fuel cycle. That means reprocessing that fuel. You've only used a third of the energy in it when you set it aside. If you do that, you dramatically shorten the half-life. In other words, the time it takes to decay to background. And if you reprocessed all that waste, it would occupy about the end zone of one football field. Other countries do this, the French. I just came back from Japan where I visited Rikashu. That's the Japanese reprocessing facility. They're going back into the business of reprocessing fuel. And so in my mind, the long-term solution, if we're going to expand nuclear, is to close the fuel cycle.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Ms. Davis.
Just a couple of questions. You referenced the flexibility agreement that we have, and I appreciate that and appreciate your comments in previous meetings that you're willing to expand or increase that as we meet up with our 5% and need more. And I would just ask you to do what you can to help us move that way quickly. And I know you referenced some difficulties with citing our solar place, but we've been in a contract with you all now for over 5 years, and we don't really have any flexibility yet. And the estimates are it's going to save our customers between $8 and $12 million a year. So delay on that impacts our customers. So I'll just say thank you very much for anything you can do to speed up that process.
No, I appreciate that. And you have my commitment to do that. I not only want you to use your flexibility, I need you to use your flexibility. And we need to expand that number beyond 5%. I think the phase, and some of our customers, we have several who are at their 5% now, but they tend to be in locations where they're rural, where there's available land, where their interconnection with the system is straightforward. Those are not, Nashville is none of those things, right? And so, which is part of why we headed down flexibility. You know, flexibility is your program. So it's a set of criteria, and if you meet them, you can go do it. But what we've learned is these constraints, and now we have to dismantle those constraints and free you up. And we're working with Teresa and her team to look to see if there are creative ways we can accelerate your flexibility projects. And I'm still optimistic that we'll find a way to do that.
Great, great. Well, that's awesome. And thank you also for what you're doing with energy efficiency and demand response. I hope there'll be some residential demand response in there that we can implement as we become able to with our software.
This is a challenge, I think Teresa will tell you, I have put to the local power company. So the advantage of this model is TVA at industry scale and local power companies who have local control and control the end use customers. The disadvantage of this model is exactly the same. There are 153 local power companies. I think there's great potential on the distribution system, on your system, to do dynamic voltage control, to do residential demand response programs, whether that's hot water heaters, thermostats, the like, to do commercial demand response that can have a significant impact. I think, but those programs have to be developed and implemented by the local power company. So that would be NES's challenge to do that with TVA's support. And the vision here is if we can implement a relatively consistent set of programs across local power companies, you can dispatch them for your own purpose, limit your demand charge, et cetera. And we could aggregate them and use them at a system level to avoid building assets that we perhaps didn't need. So I think energy efficiency in this era and demand response programs, very important. And you have some advantage because the local power companies who are willing to invest in technologies, automatic meter reading, technology out on your system that can help manipulate voltage and reactive power and the like, fiber for controls. The systems that do that are going to be able to build these technologies right on top of that. And NES, I count among those utilities.
And that just leads to kind of one final question, I think, and that is, you talked about, we don't know what the mix of fuels is going to be in the future, but I know you all have been working on an integrated resource plan. And, you know, that's a little bit of a black box to those of us who are not on the committee. We don't know where you're going or what's happening. And I just saw a report that you were about to release it and now you're not. And so I'm wondering, can you tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So, and once we issue the IRP, if you want to do a workshop of some sort to go through it, I'd be happy to support that. The integrated resource plan isn't a decision. Decisions come later. It basically defines the landscape, right? It gives you a set of scenarios, and the scenarios in this IRP range from a stagnant economy and no carbon regulation to high growth and carbon constraint, where you have to drive after zero carbon, and a number of scenarios between. And they're meant to define those paths and to clearly lay out what are the mileposts that will tell you which of these paths you're going down and what is the resource portfolio that each of those implies. And therefore, what are your no regrets actions that you can take in a year and 2 years and 5 years? We actually launched an integrated resource plan a bit early because we wanted to extend its vision farther. This one goes out to 2050, and we wanted it to include a scenario where you have to get to zero carbon. So we could look at that. So we convened the stakeholder groups, which involves a wide range of participants, local power companies, direct serve customers. The White House Climate Change Office had a number, the Sierra Club, we involved the National Renewable Environmentals Laboratory. So, and we built that plan. Out of that then comes the decision making. We were on the glide path to issuing it. And as we reviewed all the final results, we decided just a little more time would be worthwhile. We wanted to make sure the board had time to challenge it and to think it through. For example, we expect this month that the administration will issue the final effluent limitation guideline rule and perhaps a greenhouse gas rule. And we tried to model those in the IRP, but we wanted to pause and make sure the scenarios we modeled were bounding for all that. And so with all that was going on, we thought a pause was worth it. And so that's what we did. We still intend to issue that IRP after we have just a bit more time to work through it. And we're engaging that working group in this as well.
And so your best guess on when that will be released would be by the end of this calendar year, or what are you thinking?
I would hope so. You know, it's a process that has to include a lot of stakeholders in this working group, and these regulations that are about to be issued, I think, are going to be very complex. So I don't want to delay this a day longer than necessary, but I don't want to issue it a day sooner than is appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there further questions from the board? I would just say that you talked a lot about different assets that we have, and I think it's certainly on our side, the greatest asset we have is a management team and a group of 900 employees who are fully committed to looking over the horizon and taking us in the right direction. And so anything TVA can do to work with our team to help get us there is something we deeply appreciate. And thank you very much for coming in and answering our questions today. I'm sorry if they weren't hard enough for you. We'll try better next time. And we do hope you'll come back soon. We'll hold your feet to the fire. We listened to everything you said, and I think that's an accountability that you really appreciate, and we'll take advantage of that.
Well, thank you. Every really difficult one, you might not have picked up my answer, was I don't really know. We're going to have to work. We're going to have to work. We're going to have to work together to figure some of these things out. They're very difficult.
Good.
Thank you all for your time. I always appreciate and enjoy this. Teresa, thank you.